Hello. Hello. Hmm. Remember to see everyone on the other pages for our Sunday sitting together. So we have the Metta weekend people, the month-long people, the Sunday sitting people, wishing each other well. Oh, yay. A bountiful feast. I do love how as you go on through the pages that by the fourth page, there's nobody's live face. Kind of, there's no pressure to have your face on, but it is pretty cool how it shifts gradually to the beings that don't want their face showing. That's great. Yep. So today's talk is mostly about metta. I'll stand. One of the great truths of existence, the first of the three characteristics of existence the Buddha taught is anicca, impermanence. And in the face of this kind of all conditioned things that take birth, everything that appears will disappear. Another way to interpret that is that anything can happen at any moment. The truth, being connected to that truth is really liberating. Anything can happen. And I think there are ways that that manifests that can be unpleasant or pleasant. So the other night, two of the feral cats came outside to watch the sunset with me. And it had been very stormy for a while, but also, you know, sometimes there are just these experiences that are kind of this kind of quintessential, peaceful, easeful, you know, quiet. Um, there were hardly any mosquitoes yet. Um, and it was like this kind of just easeful, deep, quiet contentment. The sun went down. And just at that sort of feeling of like, oh, this is so amazing, so simple, but so sweet. Um, this huge bird dove down and almost, it looked like it was going to pick up the cat. It was just like, they both just went, you know, down and just ran away. But it was so shocking, this kind of going from like a kind of rare perfection of experience to just this terror of death, you know, coming. Uh, yeah, and then I realized why the cats don't like to sit there with me in the open. Like they always tend to go off into the grass a bit. And oh, it's like, oh, you know, that anything really can happen to these feral beings out there. Again, I just learned and saw it again. And then that same part of I consider it part of this whole little period of time. I was walking back into the house and I have a kind of ragged group of orchids that I don't take very good care of. Well, I have a group of them outside in a little circle, and I usually say to them once in a while, you know, that phrase, every man for themselves. I go, every person for themselves. I water them a bit, but what's amazing to me is that about every year, every other year, there'll be this amazing bloom, that doesn't have any, I don't understand them. I haven't had time to make an effort to understand them, but I do manage to water them. And the most beautiful flower appeared, and I brought it in. And it was, again, that sense of, oh, anything can happen. Yeah, but on a pleasant, it was very different spectrum as the bird almost killing the cat. I think a lot of you have heard of Dogen. He was a Japanese Buddhist priest that founded the Soto's School of Zen in Japan. And he said, a flower falls even though we love it, and a weed grows even though we don't love it. It's so simple. A flower falls even though we love it, and a weed grows even though we don't love it. It has that sense of the second and third characteristic of existence, the dukkha, the unreliability of experience, the beauty of the flower, right? And it's falling, and the rising up of the weed, and also that flavor of uncontrollability, that we can't control things. And so that again, that intimation, like anything can happen, and being connected with that as a form of great wisdom, learning to let things be, to let things happen just as they are. And I feel like that the fourth phrase, the traditional phrase of the loving kindness practice, Sukhiyatanam Pariharantu, is so important. It's like, may we be safe and protected from inner and outer harm. May we be happy and peaceful of heart or mind. May we be strong and healthy of body. And then may we take care of ourselves happily while living on this earth. And I think it's important to be able to include, may we take care of ourselves and others happily while living on this earth. This includes living with anicca, dukkha, anatta, understanding it. And I think when we really practice that phrase, it's almost like we're able to take responsibility, really be accountable for taking birth. Yeah, to really take responsibility that we did get ourselves here, and that we can take responsibility for living out karma, living out kamma, and living out karma together with everyone on the planet. And I feel like we can do that as we develop more access to the Brahma Viharas, to the loving kindness, the compassion, the empathetic joy, the equanimity, and the wisdom of the liberation wisdom practice. That we, as we have more skill and more tools, we're more and more flexible and actually able to be with anicca, dukkha, anatta, with more humility, with more wisdom. And in that way, we can take care of ourselves and each other happily while living on this earth, living out kamma together. I think often there's some way we take anicca, dukkha, anatta so personally, like somehow it's our fault that the flower falls and the weed comes up. It's our fault things are as they are. And that shift to being able to be at times genuinely interested in how things are, anicca, really genuinely interested in impermanence, genuinely interested in unreliability of experience, genuinely interested in. the uncontrollability of experience. So that shift in taking responsibility for our incarnation, I think really includes this understanding of our Vipassana practice, that it's really comes down to how are we relating to what's happening in our life right now, right? It's just always right now. How am I relating to whatever this experience is, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? And so there's the responsibility. It can be not out of a resignation of living our life out, but really just a clear, oh, it can sometimes be even joyful responsibility. When we are caught up in how we think things should be, or believing we have control of how things are, that's when the doubt and the loss of our own goodness starts to appear. So I find it might sound like it, but it's true. I am doing that practice more, Sukhi Atanam Pariharantu. Since we started the month-long retreats, it's become more of a part of my practice. And I think it just shifts things to that deep gratitude for being incarnated with all of us on the planet. Emily Carr was a Carr. See, it sounded, that was my Boston accent. Emily Carr, Carr, was a great Canadian artist, female artist, and she described life as like holding a baby bird in your hand. Just like holding a baby bird in your hand. And the Buddha described loving kindness. He described metta as just like a mother cow giving birth to a newborn calf. And I think we can really lose touch with this, like holding a baby bird, or like the sense of how deep this can be, the eye contact between the mother cow and the baby calf, just this quality of awareness, the metta, that's the metta. In the face of anicca, dukkha, anatta, that again, all beings share that are born on this planet, that we can receive, we can actually recognize and receive that connection, and that we can cultivate that connection with ourselves, the mother cow, baby calf, with ourselves, with all beings, with every moment. So we're taking this witnessing awareness, we're taking an observing awareness, and we're attempting to connect that with kindness. The kindness is infusing the awareness. We're connecting it with ourselves. When it's ourselves, it's the chitta, the heart center, the mind, the heart. And it can seem like it's very conceptual, or at the least it's relational. It's so important. That's where we often have lost our goodness culturally as humans, and often planetary wise. It's like this split starts to happen between that kind awareness and the incarnation itself. So technically, each moment, you can see I'm going back and forth between the Vipassana wisdom and the metta awareness. It's like technically each moment is taking birth and dying. That's why I call it the newborn heart. The newborn heart isn't a metaphor. It's not like some symbolism. It's actually like happening, whether we're aware of it or not. Each mind, body, and I'll get to that little bit, like who are we sending metta to? But that sense of just understanding that each moment is impermanent, each moment is taking birth, dying, is so important to get that newborn heart isn't a metaphor. It's the truth. And so this deep abiding with metta is really technically with every moment of life. Jesse mentioned Deepama in his talk yesterday, and I think she was such a lighthouse. If you're lost at sea and there's no chance of any light, and you know what it's like to see a lighthouse, especially before humans had cell phones or satellites, or just imagine that sense of the meaning, the symbolic nature of a lighthouse. I felt like Deepama, when I met her, was that for me with metta, that she had such access to unconditional metta. There was never a sense that she had a special person she was sending metta to, or a special this, or a special that, or a special moment, or it was unconditional. And of course, her wisdom practice was so deep. It's like she did relate to every moment equally. She did relate to each person equally. That is the equanimity practice. But that combination of deep metta and deep wisdom, just being in her presence was like being in a light, warm shower of metta. And if she blessed you, if she put her hands on you, and again, here we go again with this sense of, for her, like the touch with a person, with the metta, was very important. That was part of her blessing. And that's why I'm encouraging you to be aware of your hand when you're sitting, that the fingertips or the thumbs, something touching something, or the finding your heart touching, like that touching. Deepama would touch you. The happy Sayadaw, when he described, I asked him, how do you do metta? And he laughed. He got up and laughed, and he's like, your hand is the awareness, right? And it's like metta, 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 no part left out. No being left out. Nothing is left out. It's so inclusive. It's just like I read that this man in Vermont who had figured out that each snowflake is different, that each one is different. He just died recently. And I remember when I learned that, it was such a powerful understanding. You know, you can, when you're a kid and you're in that snow, and you notice one snowflake on your mitten and then another one, and you see that they're different, but you can't imagine the infiniteness of that diversity. Yeah? Just the extraordinariness of it, just like each one of us is so different. I read this Friday night, but I want to read it again because I feel like it's so healing. It's from the Navajo Song of Creation, and it's called When They Saw Each Other. When they saw each other. The earth is looking at me. She is looking up at me. I am looking down on her. I am happy. She is looking at me. I am happy. I am looking at her. The sun is looking at me. He is looking down on me. I am looking up at him. I am happy. He's looking at me. I am happy. I'm looking at him. The black sky is looking at me. He is looking down on me. I am looking up at him. I am happy he's looking at me. I am happy I am looking at him. The moon is looking at me. He's looking down on me. I am looking up at him. I am happy he's looking at me. I am happy I'm looking at him. The north is looking at me. He is looking across at me. I am looking across at him. I am happy he's looking at me. I am happy I am looking at him. There is such goodness, yeah. There's so much sweetness and goodness of body, mind, and heart, because again, this is including, you can continue with this, right? With trees, with lakes, with whatever is around you, with phone poles, right? It's like it's a choice of being a disconnected, alienated being. Yeah, we have that choice. Or feeling more relational and in balance and blessed. It's like that's a blessing. This is a blessing. And this disconnect from the relational aspect of this practice to me is a real loss of the chance to be liberated. A real loss. Because there's nothing holding this metta, this interconnection, this understanding of it holds us. So of course it starts relational, because that's where we disconnected. And I've been trying this practice every morning when I go for a walk, and I notice that I can start getting in a hurry with it. Like, okay, I did the sun, and now I'll do the sky. And it's like, it doesn't work. It's like I've started to see I have to slow it down and maybe take 3 things in a walk. Like I'll take maybe the fog, which is very difficult, but the fog, the trees, the ocean, or something. Like I'll try 3 and try the whole walk with those, because it's easy to start getting in a hurry. I mean, sometimes I've done more or less, but it's the sense of slow it down, make the connection, repeat it. Why are we in such a rush to disconnect from the connection, from the sun? I mean, of all things that we're like completely, utterly, totally dependent on. And we don't have it, we don't even have this connection with it. Like what kind of planet are we on, right? Where did we lose it? So you move from the relational to the deep abiding, just deep abiding with. No subject, no object, just abiding in loving kindness. But we have to start with the conceptual. We start with the relational. And as the heart heals, it will naturally drop into the deeper truth. So, of course, the question is always, where did we disconnect? And what do we disconnect from? And then where do we connect? And so that there was a talk about that in the question and answer period today. But in this practice, what I learned as I did it was that you play to your strength. Totally. And you cultivate that, you strengthen it. If there's anything Sayadaw U Pandita taught me in this practice, was that it was a form of metta to cultivate the easy. And it goes against everything that we're conditioned with in a modern society. We diss it, we diss what's easy, but this is like you strengthen it, you strengthen it, you strengthen it, it becomes an anchor. And so, yes, usually we have to have several anchors because they don't all work all the time. You need a plan A, you need a plan B, you need a plan C. Maybe you have a grasshopper as a easiest being, but sometimes that's not going to work. And then it might be the sky, or maybe it's an elder or whoever. It doesn't matter. It could be a octopus. But what matters is that there's some connection in the heart with whatever. And that classically, when it's taught with human beings, the benefactor category, which translates into the easiest being, is someone, and it's so interesting, it's someone we respect or admire, or someone who's shown us kindness. So you see, if you just took that second one, you can see that there's again this attempt to explain the value of the kindness, and how that is a lifeline for everyone. Babies die without metta. We actually die. And again, if you look at how things have gotten, as things get more modern and more modern and more modern and more technical and more technical or more corporate, it's like the withering of the heart with the lack of the kindness it's so obvious. And what I said this morning, but what I've loved about when you understand this in relationship to the wisdom practice, and then I learned most of this from Seigyo, the Japanese poet, but he was a Buddhist priest. He related to everything as Tomo, as everything as friend, all the difficult, so that he took all the difficult emotions and made them the easy being. Now that's a feat. To make melancholy, to make depression your like anchor, right? Like, and value it, right? To value loneliness. I read a lot about him. It said that he almost died of loneliness so many times. Yeah. So it's not a running away from this stuff, but it's also not drowning in it. It took him a lifetime to learn how to do that, to encourage himself as he had none. He had none. So the question is really always the great spiritual question we begin with and continue with is, who am I? We can't lose sight of that for too long. Who am I? Who are you? Who are we? What are we talking about? Yeah. And it's like in the Vipassana context, it's like, well, what is the body, right? Sri Nisargadatta says, the body is made up of food. That's all it is. Elements, earth, the Vipassana Buddhist sense, it's like earth, air, fire, water, all the sensations you can start to understand as a changing process of earth, air, fire, and water. All science tells us this now. How often do we have completely new cells in our body? It used to be every 7 years. It's probably changed, but it's not that science doesn't change, but there is a sense of understanding that our body is not made up of anything that it was made up of 7 years ago. And in the Vipassana practice, we really start to try to understand a moment or a few moments of tightness as air element, or a few moments of warmth as fire element. We don't always use the words, but we get that it's not my tightness or my warmth or my headache or my knee pain or my happiness or my depression or my joy. It's like that starts to fall away. So it's changing elements, changing thoughts, no thought. Look at how quick thoughts go, changing emotions, mental states, but it's all how we're relating to them. So when we're wishing ourselves well, it's really important sometimes to understand, what are we wishing well? And then when we're wishing someone else well, what are we wishing well? And so we kind of shift again to the classical phrases. That phrase, the first phrase, that the translation is, may I be safe and protected from inner and outer harm. That long phrase is inclusive because that includes the whole meaning of it. The meaning of that is inner harm, is the meaning of it is greed, hatred, and delusion. In other words, anytime we're identified with aversion or attachment, delusion, that's inner harm, especially if we act on it. Yeah. So here we go. It all comes down to motivation. Is it aversion, attachment, delusion, or is it wisdom, metta, forgiveness, right? All the spiritual qualities. And what's fun with this is that as we start to understand it, when we do to a gecko, may you be safe and protected from inner and outer harm, or a person or a bird, it's like it's the same meaning, or outer harm, safe from inner and outer harm. As you start to understand this, the outer harm is also any being motivated by greed, hatred, and delusion. So this is meant to bring us deep again to that understanding that what hurts, well, when somebody attacks us with aversion, that hurts. If somebody takes something of ours, right, it hurt. It's like that all the precepts are based on non-harming and motivation and restraint, kindness. And again, kind of always requires a lot of explanation because we have to be careful when we hear this. The practice is not going in the direction of demolishing greed, hatred, and delusion. It's not annihilating them. It's understanding them. It's like the intention to understand. So we're not trying to get rid of anything or get anything. We're trying to understand that there's a sound of a dog right now. There's a sensation in my knee. If disliking comes up, we relate to it the same way. We learn how to be aware of it without getting imprisoned by it, right? Without pushing it away, without being attached to it. We notice it, we let it be, we let something come and go by itself. But the trick here is that we're not projecting it. So with fear or with anger or with attachment, with all of this stuff, it's like this is where the deeper practice comes in of seeing that it's easy to project it, anger, right? The object of the anger, the object of the liking, the object of the enjoyment, right? The object of the confusion, the delusion. The typical human mind is that like knee-jerk reaction to these things is to not take responsibility, not do sukhiyatanam pariharantu, but to project it. That's like, so we're angry at something, but we don't feel it. We don't experience it. We don't take responsibility for it. And then it can't live, right? It can't take birth, live itself out, and die. We can't experience it as thoughts, physical sensations that actually we don't have to do anything with it. Just like I'm not doing anything with the sound of the bird or that thought or this body sensation, right? You're letting things happen without trying to control or manipulate, which takes so much kindness, right? So this is what we mean by kindness for the dislike, not you get lost in it and just lash out. It's more like the kindness of understanding it, not conceptually, but just non-conceptually. So in that way, we're not a victim of whatever is happening. What time is it? Okay. So this is what we mean by aversion, attachment, delusion, are like born into this world of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, of this vast range of pain and pleasure, joy and sorrow, and that we have these human learned defenses of aversion, attachment, delusion. Of course, we want to push away pain and hold on to pleasure, right? It makes sense that we're like that, right? And that the Buddha taught it's going against the stream to try to get liberated and to understand how to take responsibility for getting born. So I want to repeat it again. We're not trying to get rid of aversion or attachment or delusion. We're trying to understand them by letting them be and not trying to control anything. But we are trying to set healthy boundaries, right? This doesn't mean you become a doormat, a passive, indifferent, in denial doormat. That's the near enemy of equanimity, which we'll get more into the fourth week, but just very important. You set the boundary with great kindness for everyone, not letting aversion or fear or attachment take charge, hold you hostage, inner or outer, with great metta. When we're tired, when we're low energy, when we're exhausted, when we're sick, most of us notice that we don't have as much bandwidth to be with pain, right? To be equanimous with pain, meaning to do what I'm saying, which, aversion, attachment, delusion are ultimately painful. So it's like to be able to get that whether it's outside of us, the greed, hatred, or delusion, or inside, we don't have as easily an interest in understanding it, being with it, to be mindful of it, or have metta. But we can, I think, really cultivate compassion for tiredness. We can develop a very light care with it, and to lower, you keep lowering the expectation of how we are, right? It's like very important to just keep lowering the expectation. And one of the places, of course, I've been learning this a lot with long COVID, but when I was a kid, my dad had no fuse. My uncle, his younger brother had a little fuse. I started to recognize the difference, but and my father had super PTSD from the war and all this stuff. So but it's like, when you can describe like something unpleasant and then a little bit of irritation or annoyance, and then some more frustration, right? More dislike, and then aversion, anger, and then eventually rage, right? There's that sequence. That's what I mean by, the fuse is going, right? There's a chance to put out that fuse. You can put that out with dislike, right? If you're like, oh boy, dislike, I was hoping I could be with dislike today, right? I'm hoping I can learn. I need more experience with it. We all do. We all need more experience with learning how to be mindful of disliking and kind, right? And metta. But okay, my dad, when that fuse started, it just went all the way to rage. Like it never never hit frustration. It just went right to rage. And it as he got older, toward the end of his life, he was in excruciating pain. He just had this karma, like excruciating physical pain. And it got worse. That like no fuse thing. It was definitely not getting better. Um, and the last 2 months of his life, I spent more time with him in the hospital. It was a safer place for me. I called it the temple. And he was really, he had a reputation with all the nurses and the doctors. Boy, he had a reputation of having no fuse. Like, on his chart, it said extremely hostile. Extremely hostile. Okay, so it's like down to the very end. And they start giving him more morphine. And he was a fighter pilot, and he had the morphine box, and he actually, it was like he was back in the airplane, and World War II, kind of like Snoopy almost. That's how I saw it. And it's like they gave him more control of how much morphine he was having. And then they started actually deciding to give him more because he wasn't doing that. And the last few days, it was going up and up and up. And this remarkable transformation started to happen. I saw my father for the first time in my life relax. It could still make me cry. It's just like I had no idea. I had no idea that underneath all that, he was terrified and vulnerable. And it's just like it was not until really the last few minutes of his life that I saw like that vulnerability and fear. And he asked me for help. And it was like, wow, like just like this incredible shift happened through morphine. So I'm not a big person who, like, if you need it when you're about to kick the bucket and you can't deal with it, I'm into it. Like, I just, like, my father really helped him relax. And I think of it as his good karma that he could reach out to me and I could help him make that transition, and he was listening. It was powerful. And I think that this is a good segue into the way that I think we start with the Brahma Viharas and Metta with a high expectation and high idealism. And that there is that sense that we're not going to have any more aversion or all the difficult emotions, or, that we're just going to go up and up and up with kinder and kinder and kinder quickly, quickly. Yeah, right. It's like, it's so painful because often we forget that it's a purification process, and that if you have some good feeling of metta, some goodness, that it's actually going to actually lift the aversion. It's going to make it safer for the aversion to appear. It's going to give you more of an opportunity to see where you're not kind, and that's a good thing. It's just the pace of it. It's the pace of it, so that we start to see that it's not a matter of getting rid of the anger. It's a matter of getting kinder with the anger so that it doesn't take charge. Or with the attachment or the delusion. I'm giving that example because, of course, anger is the opposite of metta. It helps us, the kindness helps us to pull back from the object of the anger or the attachment or the delusion. There's enough safety, there's enough kindness and safety. There's an invitation in that kindness to actually want to understand where we're hooked, where we're in prison, with ourselves and with others. So this process, if we understand it in this way, where we don't disconnect and abandon ourselves if aversion appears, or frustration, annoyance, or attachment, we don't disconnect. We're not, that's a sign of fear of it, right? We're afraid of these experiences. We start to feel safer and safer, and then everyone's protected, not just us. The last time that I was in Burma with Sayadaw Ulakana, he was getting sick. We were teaching the Chazwa retreat. we've had some retreats after that, of course, with another teacher, but the last time I saw him, we found out during that retreat that he was sick. And partway through the retreat, we started having his Dhamma talks at the lower part of the monastery. He had had this beautiful Dhamma hall built on the upper part of it, but in that point in time, we had to all go down the steps. The monastery was on a steep hill, so a lot of steps, a lot of attempts at mindful steps. So we all went down for the Dhamma talk, and it was his last Dhamma talk. And halfway through, I heard this car come up the hill, and it was unusual. And then I saw someone walking along with a monk. And then I saw Sayadaw Ulakana look really like so uplifted and so happy when he made eye contact, just like the mother cow with the baby cow, right? I saw the eye contact, and this was his teacher when he was a young monk, his teacher. And there was just this, like, again, it's often so simple, but there was just this pure metta, just this energy field of such joy and pure metta from that connection. And when he came in, it was just like he was a young boy, a young monk, and he got up so spryly, like he'd not been moving that way the whole retreat. And he made his teacher get in his seat, and I still think of it, he bowed to his teacher, and you just felt this incredible metta. And so what I'm trying to say is I had that experience so rarely with my dad in that way, like that last few moments of his life. But here was this one of my teachers with his teacher having the time. His teacher showed up to say goodbye, and he didn't know. No one called him. He just knew. And at the end of the talk, everyone left and went walking up to the upper part of the monastery. And I just really felt like waiting around. So I don't know how long they hung out, but they hung out for a while. And I noticed there was a very old beat up car and a driver. And the driver was just sitting under a tree. And then Sayadaw Ulakana and this teacher came walking out. And then Sayadaw went back in, and this humble monk, came walking by me. And he's one of the quietest, most peaceful beings I've ever been around. I've been fortunate to be around a few, and I just bowed. And then he got into this beat up old car with a very old, humble driver. This teacher is not famous, not well known, humble, and he drove off. It's one of the deepest experiences of metta, and no words were spoken. I had such gratitude of what he gave Sayadaw, and then what Sayadaw has given me. And that's lineage, that's metta. So I'd like to end with a Pablo Neruda poem. I think the first and the last phrases are the most important. From life, I don't want much. I want only to know that I tried all that I wanted, had what I could, loved what was worth it, and only lost what was never mine. From life, I don't want much. I want only to know that I tried all that I wanted, had what I could, loved what was worth it, and only lost what was never mine. Let's just sit for a minute. May we all be happy and peaceful of heart. And as we go, just send each other metta, loving kindness. May we all feel our goodness.